Education is a long, complex process in America, and to fulfill society's needs, you need to go through at least 12 years of schooling to receive your GED, what society knows as basic knowledge. That's not even including college. Wouldn't it be nice to stop wasting some of the time in the middle and actually learn what needs to be learned? My specific purpose is to show, prove, and inform that modern education not only affects the things that kids learn, but how personal needs aren't getting met, and the end result of all of the flaws of education. Many teachers are being limited on the amount of time that they have to complete teaching a certain course. In my case, they have 18 weeks with only an hour and a half per class for 5 days a week. Many educators are being forced to condense their material down for the standardized tests that we have. A great example comes from world history. In world history, the amount of time that you have for the class is obviously not enough to cover the entire world's history. It's only enough so they can just teach you what's going to be on your standardized tests. The SEM, or the Student Enrichment Model, did a study with a control group and an experimental group. The control group was taught the entire subject, everything that they needed to know. And the experimental group was taught only what was going to be on a standardized test. At the end of the study, they gave both subjects the standardized test, and the experimental group obviously got better grades. But can you really base that off of what people really know? With the exception of Picasso, I can't think of a single example where you would only need to know the basic forms and not the full picture. It's like the rest just doesn't really matter. Another big problem is repetition. There's a lot of repetition that goes on, and math is notoriously known for this. Each year, a lot of the material that you learn gets repeated over and over and over again. And that's just ridiculous. So if all this time is being wasted on curriculum condensing, standardized testing, and repeating what students have already learned, is it the student's fault? There are many factors that play into the role of and their learning abilities, such as sunlight, nourishment, family support, and many more. There are many gifted students that are being held back by people with learning disabilities. Now that sounds bad, but later I will describe to you my theory of how generalizations should be removed. There are currently 2.4 million kids who have learning disabilities, representing 41% of the special education mass. Now, this discludes kids with autism, attention disorders, deafness, blindness, and behavioral disorders. In my case, I'm not the quickest learner, but at least I want to learn. I want to learn everything that a class has to offer, not just what is going to be on my standardized test. There are many myths that go into how a student learns, and most of those myths that I've researched are about group work. Group work has been believed to increase productivity in students. Hawaiian education has done many research studies, and they are all myths, because you have to realize that every high school kid is different from another. The attention span of the average high school kid is 8 to 14 minutes, and that is said by a professor at CSU who teaches psychology, again giving a generalization of students. Now, later he goes on to say that participation in the class affects that attention span and that every child is different, which is the point I'm trying to make. The results of some simplistic research suggest that education is not actually serving its primary purpose, to teach anymore. Becoming a teacher, didn't you want to teach your subject to the best of your ability without having some locks and chains by standardized testing or some other group that's controlling what you get to teach and what you don't? After 37 semesters and 10 years of teaching, can't you see how the curriculum condensing has affected your excelled students, your average students, and even your slow learning students? As a teacher, wouldn't you like to see your students excel without the limitations and the complications of the generalized high school student? And what's really at stake here? Well, it's our future Americans, our public leaders, our workers. There is no teacher to blame here, nor student. the importance of the education today is for tomorrow's leaders. Do you think that our future President of the United States can just deal with having those Picasso figures instead of the detailed example of the Sistine Chapel? My theory is that we should stop repeating what we have learned in previous courses, individualize the way that we learn instead of grouping by masses and generalizing the high school student. I'm not saying that every class should be online and everything should go at its own pace, but I'm saying that there needs to be some way that we can have at least access to more information than just what's going to be on that tax test or STAR test. So let's cut the crap, and let's actually teach what needs to be taught. You aren't to blame, I'm not to blame, but there's definitely an obvious need for change.